The reading this morning is taken from James chapter 4, verses 7 through 10. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. This is the word of the Lord.
Hey Chris, please don't forget to load the dishwasher before you go to work.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. Oh, hey, dogs. Boy, I really wish you guys could help me wash the dishes, huh?
Hey, you remembered to rinse them before putting them in the dishwasher, right?
Yeah, I totally did. Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
I know you have enjoyed the life hacks that Chris Burton has been producing for this whole life hack series, and I think we're all gaining some things that we can take home with us. I don't know if I can train our dogs to be quite that on command, but maybe they can in your house. I've got to tell you, we are so excited that just in 2 Sundays from now, we are going to gather in person together for worship. We have missed you these past 6 months. And so even today, as we're doing this service, there are ushers and folks for our Andrew ministry and other parts who are actually in our sanctuary as they are being trained to get ready for you. And that lets you know that lots of preparations are being made. The place is being specially cleaned and sanitized. It will be done so between each of the services. And there'll be plenty of hand sanitizer ready for you as you come. There's a couple things I invite you to make sure that you be aware of. As you come in, there will be several sanitizing stations, so I hope that you will take advantage of those. We ask that you sit at social distancing. Our pews here are in every other row, and it really looks nice. And so you can sit together with your family, or if you otherwise, be social distancing 6 feet apart. There's plenty of room for people to gather. The other thing that we ask you to do is to bring your mask with you, that you might share in worship. Remember that this is a time where it's only for a season, but we really need to do that out of compassion for each other. This isn't a political statement, but when I put this on, it protects me and it protects you, and so it becomes important as a statement of love and care for each other. So we will be in Mass through our service. We actually will still sing the songs, do the different parts of worship, but we will do it through our masks. And so I invite you to bring that with you and know that there are plenty of masks we will have available for you when you come. Again, this week we're going to be putting together a video that will be a welcome video preparing you for worship on October 4th when we gather together at 8:30. 9:40 and 11 o'clock, and then also for Sunday school, children's ministry, youth ministry, child care. We're doing it all together. You be praying for us. This is a special and holy moment as we come back together as the people of Christ in person. Would you pray with me and for me? Dear Lord, we thank you so much for how you have been sustaining us through these coming weeks, these past weeks and months. And now we come before your word. And we ask that your word will find a home in our hearts and our minds. Speak to us. Move us by your grace. In the name of Christ, Amen. So when you hear people speak of the devil, what comes to mind? It takes me back to my children's Bible when I was growing up. There was a picture of the temptations of Jesus, and there was Jesus in a white robe, of course, and a blue sash, and then next to him was this snarling creature in a red suit with a pointy tail and a pitchfork. We'll call that the easy-to-recognize devil. Then maybe some of you actually have some of your pictures coming from comedy on television and in the movies. I'm taken back to the Flip Wilson show. Remember that one? And there was a featured character by the name of Geraldine. And Geraldine, when she would do something or say something wrong, she would just simply say, "The devil made me do it." And I remember about 5 years of time as a child that people were just saying, "The devil made me do it." Then I'm thinking of the movie "Oh God, You Devil" that starred George Burns. And so he played the part of God in one part of it and played the devil in another part. And each one of them smoked the cigar that was characteristic of George Burns. But maybe the character the one that sticks the most for me in this day and time was the character of Enid Strict from Saturday Night Live, otherwise known as the church lady. And so she would have her patented strut that she would do. And we all know that what she would do is for everything that was said or done that was wrong, that the one to blame was Satan. And we all know that Satan's favorite color was what? Red. Now, I have enjoyed all those characterizations of the devil and laughed right along with you, but I do wonder sometimes if we buy into the idea that the devil is really a fiction that's only a problem if we make it that way. And by the way, I have discovered that the devil is a lot harder to recognize than my children's Bible showed me, and a lot harder to tangle with. Maybe a better way to think about temptation and the devil comes from the classic short story, The Devil and Daniel Webster. And that, of course, is the story of a farmer who was about to go bankrupt, who makes a deal with Mr. Scratch that will bring him good fortune in his farming for the next 7 years. Actually, the story of "Oh God, You Devil" actually does that for a musician, Michael. It's the where the struggling rock musician wants to make, and so he makes a deal with George Burns as the devil to have a successful music career for 7 years where he has adoring fans and lots of money. But isn't it true that we all tend to make a deal with Mr. Scratch from time to time? Maybe it's when we're desperate and we're afraid, or maybe it's to get a promotion at work and we compromise what we really want to say or do, or maybe it's to just placate a relative or just to make a quick buck. So James says in his letter that resist the devil and he will flee from you. But what do we mean by the devil? Some people see the devil behind every rock. The devil is to blame for every bad thought. The devil is to blame for all the people who disagree with you. So those people are from the devil or of the devil, and it's just so easy to make the devil this outside force. I think that's kind of where that character of Geraldine was. And then there are other people who are saying, look, you're making way too much of this. The devil is just a mythology that we can learn better about and we can eventually grow out of. And there's even a spiritual way that some people talk about this. That is, if I just get close enough to God and I grow in my spiritual faith enough, I won't have to deal with temptation anymore. I wish that was my personal experience, but it is not. But it hasn't been the experience of my mentors in the faith either, and it's not been the experience of the giants of the faith who have come through the ages. Actually, the closer you get to God, the more vulnerable you can become to temptation. Temptation is pervasive. Even Jesus experiences it. How pervasive is it? Well, this past week, some folks delivered some empanadas to our house. And they were pumpkin empanadas. So I gave Tina the first of that package. So she got the empanada, and then I had one. And then later, around bedtime, Tina said, I think I'd like to have another empanada. And then I stopped for a moment. She says, there are some. There were quite a few in the package. And I said, bad dogs. The truth is, those empanadas spoke my name. They said, will you want me? And I would look at them and say, no, I don't. No, I don't. But eventually, somehow, they disappeared. I just don't know quite the story. Now, actually, I could blame those who sent the empanadas to us. And I could... And then who do I blame for the fact that I just had such desire for those empanadas? Maybe God gave me that. Now I'm starting to sound like the Garden of Eden, aren't I? Where we blame God and we blame each other. It's just that pervasive, and I was helpless to those empanadas. Now, it's not just with empanadas that I have that. There's certain attitudes, there's certain things that I say, certain things that I do where I'm just as helpless. Temptation is pervasive. And maybe in the past week that's been the same thing for you. And so maybe you're hearing, this whole thing of resisting the devil, and you're hearing the voice of Darth Vader saying to Luke, resistance is futile. Well, in the scripture lesson, resistance is not futile. Resistance can be successful. But part of learning this resistance to the devil is becoming aware of how temptation comes to us in the first place. And one of the great sources for that, for me, is C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters. I don't know if you've read that book, but I commend it to you. It is how a senior devil named Screwtape mentors a junior devil named Wormwood in the art of temptation. Now, Wormwood has extravagant ideas. He wants to do the large and the dramatic and to just make everyone afraid of the devils. But Screwtape takes a much more subtle approach and instead does temptations like this. One is, and by the way, these are all temptations for Christians to blunt their witness in the world. And so the first one was to make them passive. Make them preoccupied about what they believe and what they know, but not really put their faith into action. Boy, there's a temptation that we all face, isn't it? And then the other one was make them really busy so that they can be so active and preoccupied with all that they're doing and being productive in their life that they won't give attention to the things that really matter or even pay attention to the relationship that they have with the Lord. And then there is a third one, and that was make them picky with each other. In other words, highlighting so much of the flaws and failures of other people that you don't take notice of the things that begin with you or begin with me. Now, there are 31 chapters in that book, so you can get an idea of some of the subtle temptations that are experienced, and we do experience temptation in those ways. It's good to remember that Jesus wasn't even immune to temptation. You remember when he was baptized and he was declared the Son of God, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Immediately he goes out into the desert, and for 40 days he's tested by the devil. So it's supposed to be 40 days with God, but the devil shows up to tempt him, and it's all about motive. So in the fourth chapter of James, in verses right before our scripture lesson, in verses 2 and 3, here's what James says. You want something, but don't get it. You kill and covet, but you cannot have what you want. You quarrel and fight. You do not have because you don't ask God. When you ask, you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives. So the temptations of Jesus were about motive. How does he save the world? Surely not with a cross. No, wouldn't it be better to put on a great show and create the miracle show where people would follow him for that? Why not take a second best routine and not have a fasting time with God to do it God's way? Use the ways that are right in front of you. And by the way, since you have all the riches of the world at your disposal, just go ahead and do it for your own sake. Those were the temptations of Jesus. It was all about motive. And so it is with us. You know, 1 Peter writes this: be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. So the question that I have to you is as you look at your past week, are you being part of the spiritual resistance? That's kind of the central question of this sermon and this passage of Scripture. Who are you resisting and who are you giving into? The promise is that when we are intentional about our resistance to the devil, aware of where we're vulnerable, and here's the secret to know, that each of us is vulnerable to different temptations. And the idea that somehow we are not vulnerable makes it easy for us to be had. It also makes it easy to pronounce judgment when other people fall. But the truth is, it says, resist the devil and he will flee from you. You can win against temptation, but it takes daily and moment by moment attention. But you can't be toying with temptation. You can't be going, I see that. It's kind of like me and the empanadas. The more I look at the empanadas, the sweeter they become. And it has the draw, right? And so the same thing here is that we don't toy with temptation. But instead, it says, resist temptation and it will flee from, and resist the devil and he will flee from you. Turn to God and God will turn to you. Submit to God and he will turn to you. And so the idea, and I would adapt that a little bit because I want to connect it with the rest of Scripture. I would say draw near to God and discover that he has already drawn near to you and drawn near to us. So as we draw near to God, then there is some work to be done. And that's where we draw on the life hack of the day. You can do like Chris Burton, and you can have the dogs do it for you, but I think this is really a more personal work. And so for the past 6 months, we have been sanitizing our hands. James says, wash your hands, you sinners. And so we have been washing our hands, sanitizing our hands raw. The sanctuary in 2 weeks is going to be sanitized. It actually, for those of you who are here preparing, this was sanitized before you come in as well. But there comes that time where we wash our hearts, and the language here is pretty dramatic. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify, you double-minded, because there is a more universal pandemic. And it has a 100% infection rate. And that is self-centered sin. All of us experience that. And it derails us from us being the people that God has created us to be. And so we find that washing our hearts of our own self-centeredness is a crucial discipline. And James's language, he says, mourn, grieve. The idea is face the truth about ourselves and come to the end of ourselves so that we realize who we really are and even admit our helplessness to change ourselves. And it's summed up in verse 10 of our scripture lesson, a verse I learned at a song at camp. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up higher and higher, and He will lift you up. Would you sing it with me? Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up higher and higher, and He will lift you up. But the truth is, what happens is when we see these parts of ourselves where we're giving into temptation or where we're facing that, often what we do is we move to fearful arrogance and self-justifying, and then instead of resisting the devil, we end up resisting God and giving into the devil. So that, again, I come to our central question: who are you resisting and who are you giving into? Because when we give into temptation, it becomes fool's gold. It becomes this thing that we think is going to deliver for us, and it does not. And we end up bound in what we have said and what we have done, in the consequences that happen from it, in the piled on attitudes that develop, and we are less than we could have been. But if instead we submit to God, we actually give in to God, and we allow God to do the work that only He can do, then He lifts us up. And He takes us from our being bound and sets us free. And then He takes us and sets us loose on the world to show the world a better way. So the question really is, in the rest of this day and in your tomorrows, who will you resist and who will you give into? Humble thyself in the sight of the Lord. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up higher and higher, and He will lift you up. Lord, we come to You as people who can be had, who are fallible. And we know You've created us for more. So, Lord, teach us and equip us by Your Spirit to be part of the holy resistance to that which would drag us down and blunt who we could be, and then set us loose to be the people that only You can make us to be by Your grace and by Your Spirit. And we will give You great and mighty thanks. In the name of Christ, amen. And so now, as we share in our closing hymn together, I invite you to do holy business with God in your homes and to determine that you will be part of that holy resistance and that holy yielding as the people of God. Amen and amen.